Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're having a look at another Devblog in War Thunder, and this is for a new high-tier American light vehicle. This is the HSTV-l, and if you don't know about this, it is the High Survivability Test Vehicle Lightweight. It was an American experimental tank which was developed in the late 1970s and has actually a really cool story behind it, and isn't just the single one of its class. There was actually a few of these built, and I think we've got the most normal one, which is kind of saying a lot since this one is still incredibly wacky. But let's just say when the Americans during the 1970s were trying to replace their, light vehicles, they went a little bit wacko when it came to creating designs. But it is really nice to see the HSTV-l, and as somebody who plays a lot of light vehicles and enjoys them a lot, it's nice to see it come to the game. The history of this vehicle is pretty simple though. In the mid-1970s, the US military decided to start a series of studies looking into the development of new concepts and tanks for designs of combined good firepower and also survivability. The main one, the survivability, was supposed to be achieved through smaller size instead of heavier armor protection though, and also very strict angles. And at the time, the US Army and also the Marine Corps were looking for replacements for their Sheridans and also their Ontoses. And the two military branches joined forces in a joint research program. It was called the ARMVAL, or the Advanced Anti-Armor Vehicle Evaluation. And the vehicles developed under the program would be used as test beds for various new concepts and ideas in an effort to gain new experiences, which would then in turn be used to develop future tank designs. So one of the later products of the experimental program was what you see before you, the HSTV-l. It was a small, lightweight, highly mobile tank design which had an auto-loaded 75mm on it, and it was designed to fire just kinetic ammunition in short bursts in order to wear down and ultimately defeat armor screens. So the general idea was very similar to what you see from a lot of more modern autocannons, where you would fire at incredible accuracy at a very small area of the armor, and then you would be able to punch through over time. And so instead of having just one round which would annihilate a vehicle, you would fire like 2 or 3 bursts to be able to deal with it. The trials for the HSTV started in 1981 after the vehicle was built in 1979, and at the start of the 1980s, the 75mm which was mounted on it was considered inadequate to deal with most of the Soviet MBTs of the time, and the USMC questioned the vehicle's effectiveness in amphibious landing operations. So this meant that the program was discontinued for the overall project in 1981, leaving a lot of these ideas in the dust. But then you do have to remember that a lot of these ideas, as proven by the program, were not just designed to actually build a new wave light tank. They were also designed just to try and gain some more ideas of what they wanted in the future, and that was definitely gained from this. So in War Thunder, what is the HSTV-l going to look like? Well, it's going to be at rank 6, so it's going to be very high on the chopping block. Very, very simple, or very, very similar to like the Bradley and the Sheridan. I wouldn't be surprised if it is the top tank on that left-hand side. This will mean that the Bradley will have a lot less research costs for its modifications, which is just really nice, to be honest. And after additions such as the Radkampfwagen last update, it wouldn't be surprising if this machine just becomes incredibly powerful as well. So let's talk about some of its general statistics. Obviously, it's going to be fast, it's going to be brutal, it's going to be one of those that flies around the battlefield at a crazy amount of knots, doing really ridiculous damage. So the first thing to understand is it has access to this high velocity 75mm smoothbore gun. It does have an auto-loading mechanism. Obviously you can see by the turret, which is incredibly small. It would be very odd if this didn't have an auto-loading mechanism. And it only fires one type of ammunition though. So that one type of ammunition is XM8A 1.85 APFSDS. So it does get access to APFSDS, but it doesn't get access to HeatFS, doesn't get access to anything that would be useful against helicopters, so you are incredibly limited in what you are able to do with it. Obviously, you're able to kill tanks, and yes, you do have a few machine guns on board at the same time, but normally it's kind of nice to have some form of multi-purpose sense, especially at high tiers now, where stuff such as helicopters are more and more prevalent, especially at the start of games. So this auto-loading mechanism means that the gun is able to fire at 11 rounds per minute. So, and remember, since it's an auto-loading mechanism, its actual values of its autoloader will not be affected by crew skills, because crew skills, oops, sorry about that, crew skills basically only affect it if you have a manual loader. So this thing's going to have straight out of the box pretty much a 5.5 second autoloader, which is incredibly strong. It's definitely not something to be overstated. A 5.5 second autoloader is incredibly good at the higher tiers. Generally, the best you're going to get out of even manual loaders is 5 seconds, and same with autoloaders, so this is definitely up there. It is a little bit limited though, that it only carries 26 rounds. But then again, are you really going to be firing 26 rounds? 26 rounds overall is normally the standard that I personally take in a lot of vehicles. Normally I take around 25. I take 20 of the main round to use and then 5 of other separate rounds. So 26 rounds to me, especially in a light vehicle, it sounds pretty good. The other thing as well is it talks about an engagement mode, and that is something that may become more apparent if we get more vehicles like this in the game. But the ideas that I might discuss in a little bit aren't actually prevalent in this devblog, so it makes me feel like it's not going to happen. The other things as well is when we talk about its armor, it has aluminium armor plating all over it, up to 51 millimeters, which is probably on the front. So this thing should get hull broken through the side and through the back, I believe. But you've got to remember when the Leopard 2K was added, and if you ever faced that thing. And one thing was that its turret and its upper glacis were incredibly well angled, so a lot of APFSDS rounds, they would just ricochet constantly on that machine, and they still do to this day. Well, this thing has a much more extreme angle on its upper glacis and also an incredibly small turret, meaning that there are a lot of chances for you to be able to ricochet off this machine with stuff such as the conventional APFSDS rounds, which are, of course, the meta rounds at these higher tiers, which this vehicle will find itself. So it doesn't really have great armor, but it has really great angles from the front. It doesn't have really anything on the side or really anything on the booty, so you don't really have to worry about that. But just understand that you're going to ricochet some very odd shots in this thing, and it's going to feel very, very fun. The other thing as well is because it doesn't have a lot of armor, because of the fact it has such a small silhouette, it is incredibly rapid. And it's not just because of its small silhouette and its armor. It also has access to a 650 horsepower gas turbine engine. This means that it can run around at most 83.6 kilometers per hour. So it can canter if it wants to, and the acceleration from 0 to 20 should be incredibly good on the machine. It has a power-to-weight ratio of 31.8 horsepower per ton. Now, it's kind of funny because yesterday we had a look at the Char D2, which has a really bad power-to-weight, and now we're having a look at a vehicle that has an insane power-to-weight. So it's just one of those things where one vehicle has, crazy stats and the other one doesn't. But obviously this vehicle will have really good acceleration. It will have really good general maneuverability. But because it has that gas turbine, it's going to be loud as all hell moving around the battlefield. If you haven't heard the Abrams, or if you haven't heard the XM1 flying about the place, it's kind of hard not to hear them because they are so loud going across. And hopefully, since this is a rank rank 6 vehicle, it will only cost 250,000 RP instead of the 390,000 RP that we see from rank 7 vehicles, so more people will play it quicker. And another thing I was going to talk about was with the, it talks about this idea of an engagement mode. This probably won't be for this vehicle, but there were designs in this program which actually designed guns to be able to be elevated away from their turrets and away from their chassis. What this meant was you could technically bend the gun on top of hills and stuff, so only the gun was sticking out and nothing else. This meant that you would be able to shoot targets without them really being able to shoot back. Kind of like how we have the M901 in the game, but the M901 has lost a bit of its power since, you know, since they made it so you could blow up the ammunition in the turret itself. But when it came to a machine similar to this, you would be able to just poke out the gun kind of striker style and be able to shoot targets over hills. But I don't think the HSTV-l will be able to do that, but it is something to consider going forward if we get any more of these designs which were created from this program, because there are some weird and wacky ones. The Americans really did go all out when it came to this program, so look forward to them. I'm extremely happy to see this vehicle in the game. Having more light tanks in the game, in my opinion, is great. They give access to a bunch of different mechanics which are not available for MBTs or heavy tanks, and that to me just means that there is now more variety to play in the game. Even though it is for America that already has a ton of variety, it's still really lovely to see. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Eugene's Terry, Daniel Stanton, Blackie, Elove Goat, Jay Wilt, Martinez, B. Young, Chris Giltnane, Trigger Hippie, Ambrosius McClellan, and also Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.